History so often hinges on a single agonizing spark. A moment where years of simmering resentment, political maneuvering, and just quiet desperation suddenly ignite, setting an entire continent ablaze. Well, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're stepping back in time to witness the very birth of America. We're going to trace the exact dramatic countdown to the American Revolution, following this incredibly tense powder trail from the halls of British Parliament directly to the bloody village greens of Massachusetts.
So how exactly did a debate over taxes, literally over paper, paint, and tea, explode into a violent collision that fundamentally changed the world? That's the question we're answering today. We'll explore the root causes, the dramatic standoffs, and the emergence of a quiet, towering Virginian named George Washington. Okay, let's dive into this incredible story and see how an inevitable, violent clash was born.
Section 1. The Roots of Rebellion. 11 years of tension. To really understand the explosion, we first have to understand the powder keg. These roots didn't just pop up overnight. They were deeply planted and carefully watered for a full 11 years before the point of no return.
Looking at this timeline, it's like watching a ticking time bomb of sovereignty and control. Notice that it starts way back in 1754, when a 22-year-old lieutenant colonel named George Washington fired the first shots of the French and Indian War. But then, by 1763, the British Crown issues a royal proclamation cutting off colonial access to that exact same vast, cheap land they just fought for. Add to that Parliament's stubborn insistence on taxing the colonies without giving them a single seat in government. Year by year, the list of grievances just keeps growing, turning a dispute over land and taxes into a full-blown crisis over who actually governs North America.
And then the breaking point hits. Parliament tries to assert its authority, and the colonists get fiercely bold. The final straw? A massive, absolutely audacious act of defiance, the Boston Tea Party. The sheer scale of it is staggering. 46 tons of East India Company tea completely destroyed in the harbor. This wasn't just a noisy protest. It was a devastating economic blow and a direct, unmistakable challenge to the crown.
Section 2. The Intolerable Acts, Britain's Crackdown. Unsurprisingly, the British government, led by Lord North, decided they had to make an example out of Boston, and really the entire colony of Massachusetts.
Look at the stark contrast in how this was viewed. To the British, these were the coercive acts, a necessary, forceful measure to restore order, right? But to the Americans, these were the intolerable acts. Instead of isolating Massachusetts like the British hoped, these measures were seen as unbearable tyranny. And actually, as we'll see, they achieved the exact opposite of what Parliament intended.
Because the reality of this crackdown was just suffocating. Picture this: 4,000 British troops are sent to garrison the colony. Civilian leadership gets tossed out and replaced by a new military governor, General Thomas Gage. The bustling port of Boston is completely choked off by a Royal Navy blockade, and local assemblies are severely limited. Make no mistake, this was no longer a political debate. This was a hostile military occupation.
And just when you think tensions couldn't possibly get any higher, Parliament passes the Quebec Act. Basically, to appease French Canadians, the Crown tolerates Catholicism up in Canada and hands over massive tracts of highly coveted Midwestern land to the province of Quebec. For staunch, land-hungry New England Protestants, this was literally like pouring gasoline on a roaring fire. It blocked their western expansion and felt like a massive slap in the face.
Section 3. The Colonies Unite, a Shared Defiance. This is where the British strategy spectacularly backfires. Instead of abandoning Massachusetts, the other colonies rally to its side. You have to look at the incredible shift in language here. 10 years prior, no colony would have dared claim total self-governance. But down in Virginia, after their royal governor shuts down the House of Burgesses, Patriots just reconvene on their own. This blistering quote is from their Fairfax County Declaration, calling the British actions the most grievous and intolerable species of tyranny inflicted upon mankind. And the guy chairing the meeting that drafted this radical document? Local patriot landowner, George Washington. 52. That outrage demanded a unified response. In October 1774, 52 delegates from 12 of the 13 colonies gathered in Philadelphia for the First Continental Congress. You've got men like John and Samuel Adams, John Dickinson, and George Washington, all sitting in the same room. Despite their differences, they managed to forge a united plan, a massive boycott of all British goods until the intolerable acts are repealed. They proved, once and for all, that they could unite.
But for some, petitions and boycotts just weren't cutting it anymore. Parliament had officially declared parts of Massachusetts in active rebellion. Over the winter, both sides were quietly stockpiling gunpowder. The cinematic tension hits a fever pitch in March 1775, when Virginia radical Patrick Henry delivers these legendary words. For Henry, the chains of slavery were already forged. The point of no return was crossed. Give me liberty or give me death.
Section 4. Lexington and Concord. The standoff shatters. This brings us right to the fateful month of April 1775. General Gage, holed up in Boston, gets direct orders to disarm the local Patriot militias and arrest their leaders. So, he targets a small town 20 miles away where munitions are hidden.
Let's map out this chaotic, hour-by-hour escalation. Around midnight on April 19th, 700 elite British infantrymen cross Boston Harbor in the dark. It's supposed to be a total secret, but the Patriots, they have an amazing spy network. Before the British even leave the city, riders like Paul Revere are tearing through the countryside raising the alarm. By the time the sun comes up at 5 a.m., the British vanguard walks right into a tense, armed standoff on the village green in Lexington.
The imbalance here is absolutely staggering. You've got 80 local militiamen, led by Captain John Parker, staring down the barrels of 700 highly trained British regulars. Shouts are traded. The British demand the militia drop their weapons. And then, a single shot rings out. History still doesn't know who fired it, but the British answer with a devastating volley. Within minutes, the militia scatters, leaving 8 Patriots dead on the grass. The American Revolutionary War had officially begun.
The British press onto Concord to destroy the weapons, but their element of surprise is completely gone. By the time they get there, a massive Patriot force is gathered on a hill. Agitated by rumors of a massacre back at Lexington and seeing smoke rising from Concord, 400 highly trained American Minutemen march down to the North Bridge. And now the tables are completely turned. They outnumber the British Guards 4-1. Another ragged volley is fired, the militia shoots back, and the outnumbered redcoats literally turn and run.
What follows next is one of the most grueling, chaotic retreats in military history. By noon, the British commander realizes he's in deep trouble and orders a march back to Boston. But the roads are now swarming with thousands of angry Patriot militia. It turns into a brutal, bloody gauntlet. Relentless ambushes from behind trees, stone walls, houses. Even when 1,000 British reinforcements show up with cannons at 2 p.m., the endless sniper fire turns this 24-hour march into a desperate fight for survival, until they finally stagger into Charlestown at nightfall.
The grim arithmetic of April 19th tells a really profound story. 73 British soldiers killed, 173 wounded. The Americans suffered 49 killed and 39 wounded. Now, by 18th century standards, these were technically skirmishes, but the psychological impact, seismic. Lord Percy, a British commander that day, later wrote that whoever looks at the Americans as an irregular mob is going to find themselves much mistaken. The colonists had proven, for sure, that they were a deadly military force.
Section 5. A Continental Army, Birth of a Military. The skirmishes were over, but the war had truly just begun. The immediate aftermath transformed local militias into a massive siege force overnight.
15,000. That is the immense shockwave generated by Lexington and Concord. Within just a few days, 15,000 armed militiamen from all across New England descended upon Boston, completely encircling the city. General Gage and his elite British troops were suddenly trapped under siege. Massachusetts wasn't just protesting anymore. They were in open, undeniable rebellion. 3 weeks later, a very stunned Second Continental Congress meets back in Philadelphia. They originally planned to organize more political protests, but instead, they're suddenly thrust into the role of a wartime government. And they move fast, securing military supplies, raising loans, issuing credit, reaching out to foreign allies. But their absolute most critical priority is taking those ragtag militia forces suffocating Boston and turning them into a united, professional Continental Army.
But who in the world could lead them against the greatest military power on earth? Enter George Washington. In a brilliant political maneuver to unite the wealthy Southern colonies with the fiery New Englanders, Congress looks to the 43-year-old Virginian. Washington actually showed up to Congress wearing his old militia officer's uniform, a subtle little reminder of his military experience. On June 15, 1775, he was unanimously appointed Commander-in-Chief.
Taking command, Washington faced the impossible task of building an army from scratch. He even refused a salary, and he harbored no illusions about the terrifying reality ahead. He wrote that America would either be drenched with blood or inhabited by a race of slaves, concluding sad alternatives. But can a virtuous man hesitate in his choice? It is a haunting realization. The debate over taxes was completely dead. The fight for independence had begun. As you reflect on those words, ask yourself, faced with that same brutal choice today, would we have that same resolve? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and we will see you next time.